Hi, I'm Mark Seifter. Welcome to Paizo Friday. Today I have with me Liz Liddell.
Hi, Mark.
You may have seen her as recently as Wednesday for Starfinder Wednesday, but today I'm here to introduce Liz to you as a designer, a member of the design team. It's so exciting. We're all really excited to have Liz and her creative ideas join us on the team. So I felt like before we get into this, we're going to talk about the Gamemastery Guide, but I wanted to ask Liz, what is your design philosophy, like, encapsulated into a short and not hour-long philosophy treatise?
So I think games are here to be fun. And so my the approach I'm trying to bring to, as part of the design team is to make rules that are going to be the most fun at the table, that they're going to let your character do really fun and engaging things without being a lot of work, because most of us play games to have fun and not to do work. And so I'm really hopeful that we can bring rules and mechanics to you that are going to be really fun and let you do really exciting things without being a bookkeeping nightmare or really fiddly or fussy.
All right.
That's
sounds
my goal.
like good philosophy to me.
Oh, thanks.
So, with that out of the way, let's get started talking about the Gamemastery Guide. So the Gamemastery Guide, and Liz, it's a very unique situation because we started the Gamemastery Guide and we had Steven at the very beginning when he was ordering the book, and then he left. And Liz had been editing on the book, and then she joined the design team. She even freelanced on the book too. So Liz has looked at this book from different perspectives than any other person in the entire company. So Liz, would you care to take us all on a journey through this book from your perspective?
Well, sure. So this is going to be a little bit of a funny tour because one of the first things that I worked on it as an editor was the last chapter. Now, the last chapter of the Gamemastery Guide is a really... Let me back up a step, actually. The Gamemastery Guide in general is this fantastic toolbox for GMs. It's going to make your gaming table a lot more fun, give you a lot more options to play with, and help just make you a better GM and make your job a little bit easier. And so, to that end, one of the things we've dedicated a lot of pages, almost 50 pages in the Gamemastery Guide to, are pre-built NPCs, non-player characters, for you to use at your table just as they are. So the next time you need a villain or a town guard person or the random spellcaster that your PCs are going to get, your most recent heal spells cast on you, even just, the people who are in the tavern when you inevitably start a bar fight, we've got those stat blocks for you so you don't have to work them up every time. And so it was a lot of fun for me as an editor getting to go through and seeing all of these personalities, all of these people that were put together.
Before we get too deep into that, though, if I remember, you told Peyton you wanted to talk about your freelance first, so he has queued up the picture for that before the pictures for the NPCs.
All right, Screaming Halt, we'll turn, we'll change directions a little bit. So I guess we'll look at this more from a process. Okay. So when things get started, they start with words. We hire freelancers, or we assign ourselves to write the book, and then it goes through a lot of development. The piece that I was asked to write on this book was the Afflictions section, and so we'll bring up a bit of art of our plague doctor here. Afflictions are going to cover curses. They're going to cover diseases, hence our fantastically creepy plague doctor, and they also cover a new category that we're introducing. Within Second Edition, we're bringing forward the idea of drugs.
It's not completely new.
It's not completely new. There was one
James
introduced
Sutter
earlier.
managed to heroically put out a drug with no drug rules that still managed to follow the drug rules we eventually wrote.
It definitely ended up with the situation of, hey, Liz, write some drugs. By the way, here's the one that exists. Make sure the system supports it. So that was a really fun exercise in design. Really, it was kind of like doing design work before I was totally on the design team. Because as part of designing drugs as a whole, we got to design the addiction rules. And so how do drugs work within your game, and how do they work with your player over time? And so it's, really is designing this rule around this existing element, but it seems to have come together really well. And so we've got a big spread of really useful drugs, diseases, and curses that are going to add a lot of flavor to your game. Everything from tuberculosis, so you can represent some of these real-world diseases, Stop it. We had a lot of sick people in the office lately. Also to totally supernatural curses that you're going to be able to use, whether you're running a horror game or just because your PCs are plundering a tomb. And of course the tomb is cursed. Or if you want to introduce that sort of darker or, back alley feeling by introducing drugs in your game, we've brought forward a lot of the sort of classic drugs that exist in Golarion. Things like Pesh and Zerk and Flayleaf that should be familiar names if you've been playing for a while. And if they're not, you can go check them out and see how terrible they are for you.
So, Liz, what was the sort of the trickiest part of writing those Afflictions as a freelancer?
There were two things that were tricky. One of them, what I talked about a little bit already, was just designing around something that already existed. I think it's possible I would have gone a little bit of a different direction if there wasn't already an existing stat block that had to fit within the system. But the other one that was actually really stupidly hard was figuring out how to present all of these things, because we had 3 different types of Afflictions, and initially they all 3 had different formats, and that seemed really not very usable. I'm a huge believer in user-friendly presentation, and so it's we went through several back and forth iterations of how do we get these things to look consistent, because they're all kind of a consistent concept. They're all Afflictions, so that people can at a glance see that stat block and learn how to do it. Oh, I see a great question here in the chat.
There's a lot of good questions in the chat. I'm really interested in Wither King's idea, Liz. Like, if Wither King wanted to create a setting where even Cure Light Wounds potions and certain other effects, maybe even Cure Light Wounds magic, just certain types of magic are addictive, could they use the addiction disease that you have listed in there for just anything else that in their setting was addictive?
Yeah, you absolutely could. The addiction rules are really flexible, and they're kind of variable based on the level of the drug. Which, to address Princess Brahammer's question, they do fall under the category of alchemical items. So they're items; they do have an item level. And so you can, anything that has an item level, or even you could convert a spell level over and apply these rules to them. It would be a really interesting flavor for a campaign.
Or if an alchemist was making drugs using their alchemical items.
That's right.
Normally, you're not going to be able to sell those extracts the infusions that are not going to last the day. But I think a junkie may be willing to buy a drug that's not going to last the day.
Right away. That's
I could see a really evil alchemist who does that.
Yeah. Also, just for spoilers, drugs are real bad. They do bad things to you in the game. So it's a good question of, do you really want to go here?
All right. So, but you were so excited about the NPCs.
Oh, I was very excited.
We jumped ahead. So let's go back to that, because I think that ultimately, for me, as someone who just always likes to tinker and build my own things, I don't think the NPC gallery is going to be my top chapter, although all of them are going to be really useful to me. But I think for a lot of GMs, especially ones that are just starting out, the NPC gallery is going to be like the thing, because it's what, like 44, almost
45,
50 pages just worth of NPCs.
And that's, we're looking at many NPCs per page, so it's not just one per page. You're getting 2 or 3 per page.
Let's take a look at one of the new NPCs.
Oh yeah, let's bring one up here
that we've got.
This is our chronicler. His job is to go around and record things. So if you want someone to follow you around on your Pathfinder Society adventures and write things down so you don't have to, you can hire this guy to do it. Or maybe you meet him on the road, or maybe he's fallen down a pit and you need to rescue him. The options really are endless. And this is one example of probably 80 NPCs that we have in this book. Maybe even more than that. It's a lot.
Because if there's 44 pages,
2
and there's around
page.
2 per page.
Yeah.
Some of them are longer than that, but yeah, it could be more than 80.
Yeah. I don't know. For me as a GM, I'm one part lazy, one part inexperienced, and so the fact that I can just grab these NPCs and run with them rather than having to build things from scratch just makes my life a lot easier. So I lean in first edition Pathfinder. I leaned a lot on the NPC codex. I think here I'm going to lean a lot on these NPCs. One of the cool things that we've done with the NPCs here. Can we talk a little bit about the templates?
Sure.
So every NPC that's set up with the stat block here in the Game Mastery Guide is set up with a human ancestry. They're all assumed to be human. And then at the very beginning of the chapter, we have little miniature templates that you can snap on to adjust the ancestry of that NPC to be whatever ancestry you need. So you don't end up with this weird thing where you need a, level 7 villain, but the only level 7 villain is a gnome, and that doesn't really fit your story at all.
Why? Do you find gnomes aren't villainous?
They can be great villains. Sometimes.
Yeah. So you went through the NPC gallery as an editor. What were some of the main challenges that the NPC gallery presented to the editing team to deal with?
Well, part of it is that there's a lot of them, and they're all stat blocks. Stat blocks are technically challenging. I mentioned before that I'm really big into usability, so I really want to make sure that we are presenting things that are accurate and easy to reference and concise. And so there was a lot of conversations about making sure the stat blocks were being presented in the right order, that we were using the standardized wording that you're going to be used to as a GM. So you're not saying, oh, does this do the same thing as that other ability? No, it's the same ability. It uses the same language. And then we just sort of keep an eye on the numbers to make sure that we don't have any first level commoners with perception modifiers of plus 79.
Yeah, but then at least the commoner will be able to notice the monitor lizard before the monitor lizard
notices the commoner. Mark and I are both making jokes about a misprint that almost made it into the second edition bestiary of is it first level or third level?
It's a pretty low level lizard that we fixed it at the last minute from the printer proof. You may have heard of the monitor lizard, and it's plus 79.
It's plus 79. They're very attentive lizards. Anyway, so we got off a little top there.
But yeah, we were talking about the NPCs. There's some great different groups of NPCs. All told, they're grouped by category of how you can use them.
That's right. So you can go to a section and say, oh, we're in this pub. I need a bunch of publicans.
Yep. And there's a publican section. In fact, the sections are courtiers, criminals, devotees.
Devotees being particularly religious folk.
Yeah, sure. The downtrodden, explorers, foresters, healers, laborers, magistrates.
Yeah, those are going to be your officers, your barristers, your judges.
Mercenaries, mystics.
Those are your spellcasters.
Officers, which are actually your officers.
Can we say something really cool about the mystics?
Okay.
The mystics have another little snap-in piece that I'm really excited about, where we present you stat blocks that are ready to be used at the table. And then we provide some additional information if you need to make this an evil spellcaster. Here's a section of spells that you can slot in instead.
I think that's the devotees.
Isn't that devotees?
I think.
I think it's in one of those two sections for sure.
And I'm not sure how much of it survived copy fitting.
I know some of it did. Yeah.
But yeah, the officers, which was actually the place where. So most of this Liz worked on as an editor because we finished this chapter first. But it is the one place where there was something we needed later on. Liz made her first art brief for a piece of art in the officers section.
That's right.
It was a sentry guard who's up on the wall.
Up on the walls, an archer sentry. So they're the one up on the tower with the bow shooting anybody who gets too close. I ordered one piece of art that isn't going to be in this book, but will come out in a product that will be announced soon.
Yes, the type of product you might expect to find the other things that are not in the book. But the officers section was one of the few times that we copy fit something and we're like, wow, we actually just have a lot of space in a stat block section.
Usually we end up having to make cuts, but this one was short. We had to fill it in.
Let's do a sentry. So there we go. We've also got performers, the publicans that Liz mentioned before,
right?
Scholars, seafarers, tradespeople, and villains.
So Peyton, if you can bring that art up here, this is where you're going to find our favorite anti-paladin, who's going to come and smash the ever-living heck out of your characters with that giant axe, and she is not going to feel bad about it at all.
And Game Master X is very informed with our most recent releases that World Guide 2 has some theme templates for organizations. So if you've got sorry, not World Guide 2. It's called
Lost Omens Character Guide.
Internally, we sometimes just refer to them by the number that they were after the World Guide. The Lost Omens Characters Guide has theme templates for so many organizations that if you have both Character Guide and the GMG, you're going to be able to just apply those theme templates onto any of these characters.
Yeah, they're super customizable and designed with the intention that you can use exactly those theme templates with these NPCs. Now, there is another theme template in here that got added. Again, it was another one got added at the very last minute to make a skill challenge character. So it might be a first level character.
It's not exactly a theme template, if I recall correctly. It's more like advice. I saw it actually during,
it's got some
during
rules
a
in
final flip through. It has advice and some sample abilities.
Yeah, with the idea being that you might have a first level character who is not going to be any good in a fight. If you decide to have a fight, like you're just going to win. But that's not the point, because the point is you're having a bake-off with the town's grandma star baker, and she might not be able to hold up to you in a fight, but she's going to be a serious challenge in front of that oven. And so we've found a way to represent that kind of a skill challenge NPC who's going to be able to be a challenge and present a non-combat encounter type that's still going to provide you with XP rewards without having inexplicably the baker grandma able to take out a first level adventuring party.
And if you've downloaded the free Monster and Hazard PDF from Paizo.com,
it came out just last week.
You've already seen the rules for how we suggest to build those in general. But Liz is talking about some more specific advice in the NPC gallery that even includes some sample abilities that you could put onto such a character.
Right.
And that's just, there's all sorts of fun tips in the Game Mastery Guide. It just about is bursting with information and usability, because I know that I've really loved almost every Game Master book that I've read, but there's sometimes been sections where I went through and I was like, okay, this section wasn't for me. But I feel like even though the NPC gallery, I said I'm not going to use as much as some of the other chapters, I feel like all 5 of these sections are for me.
Yeah, there's such great information in this book. Now, one of the things that I just I saw scrolling past in the chat, so I'm gonna reference a comment that's gone off the screen now. But someone asked if there are high level NPCs in this book. The NPCs in this book go up to about 11th or 12th level.
No, it's much lower than
somebody
that.
had an 11th level.
No, there definitely aren't. You may be thinking about Character Guide. Which has some slightly
some higher ones.
So they go to like 7 or 8 at most. They've skewed toward the lower for a very specific reason. When Steven ordered them, which is by the time you get to the very highest levels of your game, you're more and more likely to want to use a custom NPC to represent that character. Whereas at low levels, there's all sorts of concepts of ideas of a low level NPC that you're just going to need all the time and at those levels. So it's filling up the lower ranks so you can make something unique for the higher ranks.
For the high ranks, right. It doesn't matter if the mooks are generic, but you usually want your villain to be someone to stand out.
And that's sort of why it stays at the lower levels and in the NPCs. So any other, other than the stat block challenges, any other particular editing challenges, or just they were each different? I know there was like
it's a new system. We're learning
versus
things.
Numbering was a definite question.
Presentation of information. How do we make this the most usable for you so that you can come into this book and find what you need right away? And I think we've found some good ways to do that by grouping them by type, by ordering them within that by level, so you can kind of pick the challenge that's going to be appropriate for your group, and then providing an index reference for you so you can find any stat block right away.
Because the beginning of the NPC gallery has an alphabetical
list. Alphabetical list of everyone in that book. Yeah, so it's really well organized.
So that way, if you're
super
just like,
usable.
I need a judge,
you got it.
Might not say judge, but if it does. You can find it judge. Because it could say magistrate, but I guess the section's magistrate.
The section is magistrates.
And then the judge can throw the book at them. Literally has a ranged attack where he throws the book at them.
She throws the book. So yeah, that's
I think that's the NPC gallery.
Good explanation of what's going on there.
So you looked at NPC gallery.
That's right.
And some of the other things we had turned over, and then suddenly,
lo and behold, I was hired on as a designer. So that was really interesting because it went from being, I'm sort of receiving material from the designers and going through our usual edit process on it, to being on the other side of that coin, and suddenly I'm the person sending things to the editors, and all of a sudden I feel terrible that everything is so late. But it's
did you also feel terrible that things were late when you were an editor and you were getting them late?
No, I was mostly cranky about it.
Okay, so from cranky to terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really painting a wonderful picture of this job experience.
All right.
Yeah, but it was really interesting to be on the other side of that coin. In fact, one of the first things I did as a designer that was for the Game Mastery Guide, I got handed a section and said, "Okay, go ahead and do a development pass on this." And I said, "Oh, okay. You just want me to change things?
Yeah.
Do you want me to ask first?"
do a design pass, take a look at it from a designer's perspective, see if the design is meeting all of what we need. Let us know what you changed.
Yeah, and so it was definitely some very hesitant steps, especially because as editors we were given a lot of training to not make changes without consulting with the designer, so we don't accidentally change something that has bigger ramifications. So that was a big change for me to be on one side of this, to switch over to the other side of that proverbial wall. Actually, there's a physical wall too. It's there's the other side of the building.
And we didn't necessarily make it easy on you, because among some of the hardest things to design appropriately for the game are subsystems. You've probably seen subsystems if you've played in Pathfinder for long enough. You guys at home, they appear in adventure paths, books like Ultimate Campaign.
Yep, a lot of Pathfinder Society scenarios.
Oh yeah, and they are hard to get just right because of the fact that they are different than the main gameplay. You often don't have nearly as much playtesting as the main gameplay, so you really have to zone in on design. So, of course, the first thing we gave Liz to look at was as the subsystem section. We have the really cool art for the opener of the subsystem section.
Yeah, we have a whole chapter of subsystems in the Gamemastery guide covering a bunch of different things. Here's our chapter opener. So, there's some crazy stuff happening in this picture, and it's designed for what we provide in the chapter to make it happen.
It is one of the best pictures in that chapter, except for the flying carpet chasing after the
orc on a triceratops. There is great art throughout this book. It is such a fantastic, fantastic
you can tell
book.
It's awesome because Liz could just finish my sentence at the same time. We all know what the best picture was in that chapter.
It was a pretty good chapter. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good picture. That's in the chase rules when you pick up your copy.
So, like, one of the first things we gave you, it wasn't even like a second pass after another designer had looked at it. It was just an infiltration system, and admittedly, it was one that had been used in an adventure path. You guys will see it later on, and written for that adventure path. And Logan had sort of looked at it as the design lead when it was in that adventure path,
right?
as did James, as the developer for the adventure path. And then Steven had sort of taken it from the very specific example in the adventure path and converted it over
and broadened it out a little
bit. So we did have a lot of people who had looked at it, but you took the very first critical designer eye on making a design pass on it.
Right.
How was that experience?
It was hard. I rewrote the entire thing 3 times, and then I learned that was a really inefficient way to do that. But it was a lot of going through the system and kind of deconstructing it, taking it apart and asking questions like, what is this supposed to be doing? What's the context of this? What other systems in this book are we working with that we need to make sure this is compatible with? So we don't want to create 2 systems that are similar and have completely different rules. And we don't want to have 2 different subsystems using the same rules term for something differently. And so there was a lot of research that went on. There was a lot of, let's break this down and reorganize it and repackage it and reconceptualize it to see if we can get it to do what it's doing. So infiltrations are going to be, they're your heists. You can't fight the entire cult, but you can sneak into the cult and steal their relic.
It's where you can be Leverage or Ocean's 11 crew.
That's right. So the point is not to fight things. The point is to not fight things. So it's a very skill-based system, and it's a little complicated because heists and infiltrations are complicated things that you're going to be doing in your game, and we want to be able to represent that in a way that has some degree of realism to it, but without getting so specific that we're trying to define every possible potential thing that could ever happen. And so I think we got there. It took a couple revisions, and then, I rewrote it and I said, okay, hey, guys, this is what I'm thinking about needs to happen here. And they would say, oh yeah, well, what about this situation? And I go, oh, okay. Let me go rethink this. And then I rewrote it again, and we came back and hashed through it again. And I think in the end we got it to a place that's going to be really fun and has a lot of.
I did another pass on it and brought back questions to Liz, and we hashed out like a thing or two that I had noticed on there.
Yeah, and then in the super, I'm on the other side now, we sent it off to edit, and the editors came back to me and said, oh, what about this? And I'm like, oh, no, now I have to answer your questions. I don't just get to ask them anymore.
You don't get to send, there's only 20 questions, but they all have A through J portions.
I ask a lot of questions. It might say something about why I'm on the design team now. But yeah, so that was sort of the experience there. One of the things I learned was stop and talk through the ideas before you rewrite the section.
Yeah, that's just basically, just for all of you at home as well, a really important principle in game design, and it's a reason why we use top-down for so many decisions in the game. Oh, thanks so much for giving those gift subscriptions out there, Stale. But one of the reasons that we made the decision to use top-down when you create monsters, we let you guys use that, is that when you stop and think and build your concept from the beginning, instead of going into the weeds bottom up and working out the details first, you save so much time.
Yeah, start with where you're going and then figure out how to make that work rather than starting with the pieces and what you can build with them. Because you know where you want to go most of the time.
Because if you're out there and you're homebrewing for your game, like, we're making a system where almost every GM, I think, can do that.
In fact, we have a tool in the Subsystems chapter to do exactly that. Can we talk about that a little bit?
I think we can.
Yeah, so there's one of the first things we introduce in the Subsystems chapter of the GMG is called Victory Points. And it is a subsystem that's super generic and super flexible so that you can use it to be a subsystem for whatever you need it to do. It's sort of the framework of a subsystem.
And we use it.
We used it in the whole
time.
chapter.
It's in Infiltrations.
It's in Infiltrations. It's in Chases.
It's in most of them.
Yeah. And so...
So we start by teaching you how to build a subsystem and how we're going to build the subsystems. And
but then the tool's there, and you can take it and you can build the subsystem to do whatever it is you need to do.
Yeah, Liz, that's a great example of our top-down design. Because I feel like you can always build something, but if you're really a designer, you think first and think about how to build things as well.
Right, and what it is you want to be building.
And Liz figured that out like almost immediately.
It took me a couple of rewrites.
So one of the few subsystems, though, that did not have a victory point style, and one that just is always a pretty complicated one, that I had done a first pass on after Steven wrote it, but Liz, you really helped finish it off and get it to a place, because, like I said, we do a pass off.
Yep, we trade around.
That was vehicles, which I'm assuming that the chapter opener is referring to when it shows a flying ship on fire. To crash.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you that the about to crash part was definitely the part that took the most design work.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of conversation. So, what is a vehicle? Like, it's an object, but it's moving, and so you have to use actions, but, like, are you taking the actions, or is the vehicle using the actions?
What happens if it runs into another
What happens
vehicle?
if you run them into each other?
Running over somebody?
Right, vehicles have momentum, whereas individual creature doesn't.
What if you stop using actions?
Right, what if you just stop driving?
You get the horse to its maximum speed on your chariot, and then you're just like, nah, I'm gonna go, like...
Stab this guy over here.
Stab this guy and cast a spell. I'm not going to bother controlling it.
Right. And so there's a lot of things to think about. And I feel like there's a potential there for that kind of a rule set to get really, really bogged down in details. And I really wanted to avoid that. I want vehicles to be something that you can use easily so that you can use them in your game and you can have the flying carpet chasing the triceratops and have that work in your game without having to do a bunch of gymnastics or everyone haul out these huge books and look at this new subsystem. So what we got to was a really good end point where we're paralleling a lot of existing actions in the game. We're using the same action economy. The driver of the vehicle is using their actions to make the vehicle go. And then we have a couple of extra actions and considerations for those places where it's not just like a person, where to account for momentum, to account for the fact that you have to keep driving it or bad things happen.
So Laurie 7x3 has an interesting question. What was the top thing that you learned, and I'll try to answer this for me, about GMing from working on the Gamemastery guide?
I've learned to care less, which is a really funny thing to say after working on all of these rules and all of these details. But it really kind of showed me how much the framework is there to support you as a GM and how as long as that's getting to your table is having fun, then that's the point. That's the point of Pathfinder, is to tell a story with your friends and for everyone to have fun together. So, if you're adhering to the minutiae of the rules and that's something that's working for you and your whole table, that's great. And if your table is willing to fly by the seat of its pants and just sort of roll with it, that's great too. And so that freed me as a GM a lot to really be able to know when I can let go of the rules and just hand wave or make things up.
I think the thing that I learned that was like the most like an interesting or different take was sort of Logan's idea about adventure recipes, where you sort of build up a recipe ahead of time for your adventure or even campaign, and then you sort of just grab a list of ingredients and then toss them in.
Yeah, you want to talk a little more about that?
I've never thought of adventures in exactly that way.
This is a section I actually haven't looked at them a lot.
Okay.
So you want to talk a little bit more about that section?
It basically is what I said. So you're like, oh, I'm going to make an adventure. Well, and here's some sample recipes for like romantic fantasy, like knights and chivalry and all that stuff. Oh, well, it says throw in a tournament, throw in a social situation where there are other knights possibly wooing someone, throw in like this number of encounters and like 2 to 3 big boss fights or something like that. And I'm not getting this exactly right, even though that is one of the recipes. And that is and maybe like 1 to 2 long explorations where you're going after some faraway quest that you need to bring back, and then those are like the ingredients, and together you can put together a recipe.
Yeah.
And that was just an idea that Logan had, and we actually had Owen Casey Stevens, who's not at Paizo anymore, but
he's a great game designer, great writer,
and freelanced out some of the other recipes. So.
Yeah, it's and so that's another tool. Like we said, this book is full of tools. That's just one more tool that you have as a GM that will help you make your games better.
And Zerg's Titan says, "Relics, please," and there are relics.
There are relics. You're welcome.
That's right. So Quincy Forder is wondering if there's a rule set for magical or mechanical intelligences, and there sure is an intelligent items section.
That's right.
That's one that that while I worked on as primary. Liz, were you working on that as I think you did the second pass on that.
Intelligent items. I remember talking about it, but I couldn't tell you if it was because I was editing it.
You may have been editing. That's what I was wondering. Were you editing it or doing a second?
I know I edited artifacts.
So we definitely have some rules in that where we take a look into. I like the way Quincy worded the question, where it's like they're an intelligence. That's
right. That's right.
They're a character.
Right. It's not just an item that you're carrying around.
It's
a personality. It's a consciousness.
And we really went into that in detail. And there's some really funny ones in there, like
the sword that won't stop singing. It sings all the time. It is, but it's great.
It's great. And I also like the intelligent headband of vast intellect that is even smarter than your character is, and it will not let you forget that fact.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it's absolutely. We're trying to make sure that we're watching and seeing what you all need in your games, what we need in our games, and making sure we can provide those tools for you.
Yeah, there's also a shield that has the intelligence of like a martyred paladin or something like that, and it will block with Shield Warden for your allies,
whether you want it to or not.
It'll do it itself, but whether you want it to or not. Even though I want to keep this shield, the shield's like, no, your ally's gonna die.
Yeah, you gotta help your friend, buddy.
It doesn't take your action; it'll just do it.
It just does it on its own. So yeah, there's a lot of fun pieces in this book to run around and play with. Now we had talked a little bit about building things, building adventures, building NPCs, building monsters.
That's all in the chapter called the tools or toolbox, depending on if you wanted to. Basically, just to go through the chapters. I know we've said them before, so
but it doesn't hurt to say them again.
We've got the first chapter is advice.
Like how to be a better GM. What kinds of techniques are out there if you're not feeling certain of yourself or if you're ready to take your game to the next level.
Yep. It's all about advice on exactly basics, taking things to the next level, running downtime, running exploration, running encounters, all sorts of tips, how to rarity in your game in many different ways you can use it, GMing in special circumstances, like large or small groups. There's a great picture of Kyra and Mariciel are the only people in the
party members.
And there's like 4 ancient red dragons attacking them, and they're just losing, and they're like, what's going on? Why
Too many dragons.
The name of the picture is Too Many Dragons.
Too many dragons.
So, and then the toolbox, which is all about building new things and all sorts of new items, the afflictions that Liz wrote. Then the subsystems. Then the variant rules, which
we haven't really talked about a lot at all yet.
They're about
we'll come back to the variant rules.
They're about modding up your game, kind of like Pathfinder Unchained, or just like, what if you want to run a game with rules that don't work the same as the default ones for the core? Then the NPC gallery.
The NPC gallery. Now, there's a great question from Chemlack of, are there downtime activity actions defined in the GMG? There's a lot of information about running downtime and how to interact with what your players want to do during downtime, whether it's a defined action or not.
That's right.
Downtime is very, very flexible like that. So it's, But
there's a lot of good tips and...
downtime events.
Sample downtime events, because remember how the core says every once in a while you should do a special event, right? If they take months of downtime, there are some samples for each of the core downtime activities. It's like, was what they were doing earning income? Here are some examples of things that could be an event.
Right.
Was what they were doing crafting?
There are some things that might happen.
What if they were doing, what if they were retraining? These could be events. So there's examples of events that could show up there.
Yeah, what else are we going to pull back the curtain on in here a little bit?
I think that overall we've covered a lot of the kind of things that you had been working on, but there's one section in particular that, because on this book we talked about freelancers writing a lot of the things that came in, but there was a lot we wrote in-house. And of that, all but a few pages had actually already been written in-house before Liz joined, but there was a little bit that hadn't, and it was attached to the building the world section. So there's a building the worlds and nations and settlements. There are also planes, but that had been
planes are there. We've got planes down. So the building world section was one that I once I sort of had my designer feet under me, I picked up and I said, okay, let me take this forward. Let me see what I can do with it.
So nations and settlements, Liz wrote
from scratch. There's nothing written about them.
There was a settlement stat block that Linda had put together for volume 4 of Age of Ashes using best practices from a discussion the developers had about what they wanted in it. But we knew that wasn't finalized. So literally the only thing you had was
one stat block.
This is an example of a stat block
of what it might look like.
Go to
town.
Design something.
Yeah. And so that was an interesting process because I actually started with building worlds, and in the process of going through that section and bringing that section into a useful tool that we think is going to be really helpful for anyone who wants to build their own setting to play Pathfinder in. Obviously nations are part of worlds and settlements are part of worlds. So in developing the building worlds, really informed, okay, here's what we need in nations and here's what we need to have in the settlements. And so those sections almost in some ways kind of fell into place based on the material that was hinted at and sort of left out of the building worlds section. So it was we could just sort of plug those in. So I remember there was a question, I think maybe on the forums, about nation and settlement stat blocks.
Yes, they asked, will there be in here?
Will there be? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we've got the framework for you to use for your own nations and settlements. We have a couple of samples from Golarion that we've got 2 nations and 2 cities.
That's right. What do we have? We have
Rahadoom
and
Andoran?
And Andoran, maybe?
Andoran are our nations. And the cities are Port Peril in the Shackles. And a small town called Otari.
On the Starstone Isle.
Yeah.
All right. So,
So we have an extra piece that we want to talk a little bit about. So if we can pull up our last piece of artwork here.
That's right. Oh my goodness.
One of the things we have in our variant rules is something that people have been asking about for a long time, which is Dual-Class PCs. So we have multi-class archetypes in the game already. You can always play a member of a class and take some abilities from another class using those multi-class archetypes. But what the Dual-Class PC system does is lets you just have 2 classes, and you get everything from both of them.
Caffold's Byler, you're sure right. That is Champion of Pharasma Redeemer Sione. That's why she's got the little spiral on
the middle of her heavy armor. Right. But we loved this art. This was such a fantastic piece of art that we wanted to share it with you, and such a great tool that you're going to be able to use in your games. It's really fantastic for if you have a smaller party that is, if you've only got 2 characters and you need to cover all of your bases, this can be a way to do it. Or if you just want to have a really wild and crazy party. Question in the chat channel of that sounds unbalanced. We addressed that. So this is one page.
This is only one of the pages.
Goes on to the next page.
On the flip page, it talks just frankly with you about the fact that as the GM, you might need to increase the challenges a bit, maybe not as much as you would think, except for one thing. And that might be where you find it unbalanced, Laurie 7x3. That is, if you're a fighter and a wizard and you dual class those, that's great. You're great in every situation, but your casting is not better than a wizard's,
right?
And your fighting is not better than a fighter's.
Right.
If you multi-class 2 martial classes usually, and they overlap what they're doing, fighters get extra accuracy. Barbarians do a ton of extra damage because we know they're not getting the extra accuracy.
Right.
But if you
put them together,
then you wind up, if anybody in your group does that, you need to make the fights much harder in a way that you wouldn't if you just tell people, please don't do that, or find a way to maybe give the multi-class version of one of the 2 of that feature and otherwise just apply it regularly.
Right.
You can figure it out based on your group. The trouble comes when one person did it and
nobody else does. And the section on the facing page of this one addresses that and goes into detail about how you can make sure that your games are fun and engaging while using these rules without having something that's going to end up broken.
Plus, that next page that isn't here has a picture of all the PCs as pirates where Drugami has an eye patch.
It's fabulous.
But that's because this feats and features section also includes give everyone a free archetype.
Free archetype.
That's one of the variants where you just give everyone basically free archetype feats.
So let's say we're playing a campaign where we're all firebrands.
Yep, or all pirates.
Or all pirates, more to the point.
Yes.
Then everyone gets that archetype. Because everyone in the party has that archetype for free, then you're not going to unbalance your game because everyone's on the same page with it.
That's right. From levels 2 through 20, you just get an extra feat that has to be used for
an archetype.
And then there's some discussions about the fact that you need to rebalance certain feats that give you you gain resistance equal to the number of feats you have from this archetype, or hit points based on the number of feats you have from this archetype because, well,
it could scale quite a lot. But then, again, we go into the detail to guide you in using that tool in your game so that you don't just have this tool with no instructions.
That's right. So there's all sorts of variants like that in this book. It includes not only these feats and features variants, includes level 0 characters if you want to start out
play out some of your backstory.
Some ability score variants if you want to use point buy for everything and everything with point buy, for example. Variants for alignment, such as removing alignment.
Right.
Deep backgrounds where you roll on tables to determine everything that ever happened to your character in their background.
It's really interesting.
Generates the background.
Yeah.
Magic item variants.
Right. So if you want to play a really gritty, low magic setting, we give you the tools to do that without breaking some of the assumptions of the game.
Right. Absolutely. Also, there's a variant in there for just high quality items that are crafted by mundane people.
Right. If you just want to make a really, really exceptional sword, you can.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we borrowed one idea that was really popular from another game you might have heard of called the Starfinder role-playing game. That's the stamina subsystem. Yep. So if you really like that idea of stamina points and resolve points to give your characters a little more lasting power in a fight, we've ported that over so that you can apply that in your Pathfinder Second Edition game.
Plus, we have proficiency without level, just basically a variant on the proficiency system where you don't add your level. And it talks about everything you need to do to handle that, and a skill point system that sort of
gives you some more granular
choices by giving you more points, but it's more expensive to raise a skill up to the higher ranks than it is to the lower ranks.
Right.
So, yeah, there's lots of variants in there. You're going to be able to check them out later on.
This book is going to be awesome. It's coming out in the winter of 2020, by which we mean the first part of the year.
Yes, the winter.
Yeah, the cold part at the beginning of the year.
That's right. So let's move on to questions, shall we?
There's been a lot of great questions
that have been queued up from actually a thread in Paizo.com with some very good questions about the Gamemastery guide that I think Peyton has over here.
There we go.
So let's see. There's one that asks if the book is going to talk about non-monetary rewards such as custom rules elements, access to uncommon rare ones, favors with individuals or organizations.
Yeah, so that's it does give some advice on how to handle rewards for your players. This is in that first advice chapter, the Game Mastery Basics. And it's going to talk about things like the core rulebook mentions giving feats to your players as rewards and ways to do that so that you don't have, one player who gets an extra feat and everyone else is left out. What you might need to consider, maybe you just want to give access to feats that the players can then spend their character progressions gaining.
Sure.
So
and if it's big enough, you could give everybody, be like, we're doing this giant militia system, and it's the most important thing is how good your militia is, and if you guys get to rank 5 with the militia,
everybody gets
a first level skill feat.
Yeah,
you could do that.
You can totally do that, and we give there's advice and guidance in this
terms of organization rankings and having people like you in those organizations. We also have a reputation subsystem for that,
and a leadership subsystem.
Sure, if you want to start your own and gather a bunch of cronies.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So what else do we have here?
Let's see.
Oh, they're moving a lot.
Whoa, they're moving. What does the stat block for a nation or settlement contain?
Well, yeah. So the idea we have behind a stat block is that it needs to give you the information you need to use that entity. So for a NPC, it's the statistics for the character. For a nation or a settlement, well, you're not going to go fighting it, so it doesn't have an armor class. But it gives you the core snapshot information that you're going to need to use that nation or that settlement in your game. So it's going to include your alignments. For settlements, it's going to tell you how big they are. And they'll have a level that will tell you roughly sort of the degree of sophistication and size in that settlement. Mostly this controls what kinds of items are available in that settlement. It'll talk some about the significant NPCs in the nation or the settlement. So like your nation's ruler, the city's mayor, and then sort of snapshot other information. If there's anything unusual about that settlement, if it's, the stat block that Mark referenced earlier was for a dwarven settlement that was really, really interested in crafting and artisanship.
Especially weapons and armor.
And so it had a special ability that said, hey, you can get higher level weapons and armor in this settlement than you'd normally be able to. So that sort of thing, just so that you can take this information that's, half a page of one column and know enough about that nation or settlement to be able to talk about it and to be able to present it to your players.
So, Amos Thoreau, it might be Thoreau, has asked if we can share specifics about how to balance free archetypes and extra feats. Basically, the way I would say it, and you'll want to read the book to get everything, is this. Assuming your players are not creating one of those, like, more non-linear power combos, like going barbarian fighter or something like that, you don't actually have to throw monsters that are higher level at your party. In fact, it can be more fun if you want them to feel powerful not to do that. Instead, just add a few extra abilities to the creature that you're throwing at them. Something that's equivalent, like or that's useful, like spellcaster enemy that didn't have steady spellcasting and quick recognize spell and maybe a counter spell. You could throw those in on a spellcaster enemy pretty easily. Right, because what you're really gaining when you take two classes is versatility. And so the broader you can make the challenges, that's how you're going to keep your characters engaged. And especially if you have a small group, then giving them that extra versatility actually just brings them back up to where a normal 4-player group would be. That's right. So you don't have to rebalance any of the numbers or really do much to change things. You just toss in an ability. Yeah, make things more varied. And almost like I found when running the game that it's easy to toss in the abilities that are missing because they're very conspicuously absent. All of those spellcasting abilities that I mentioned, it's like, wow, trap finding. Hold on, my spellcasting monster can't even recognize the spells the PCs are casting me, and I sometimes just give it to them anyway. Right. So it's like they probably should be able to do that. And so, I mean, throughout the whole game of Second Edition Pathfinder, feats are giving you more abilities, they're giving you more things you can do, but they're not generally changing the numerical backbone of the game. And so when you're giving your players more feats, you're not usually going to have to change the numbers of things very often because it's not going to usually change that numerical underpinning that's holding the game system together. Right. And if your players are finding a way to do that, then you need to buff the enemies. But most of the time that won't happen, especially if you talk to your players and explain, I want to give you lots of versatility. I want to let you tell the stories of these unique characters that you've built. But I'm going to have to do more readjustment if we really create some kind of unintended power combo. So let's work together to you can even point out some to be in advance that you've seen that you might want, that I might want to tell people to avoid, and we'll try to find those and avoid them, or find them and embrace them. And
embrace
we'll just
them,
fight
right?
the highest level possible stuff. So
yeah. So we've been talking a lot about pirates from Pharos 1968. Rules for ship-to-ship combat or mass combat.
if you have one ship,
if you have one ship and another ship, we've got rules.
rules will cover you there, even if it's just a few. But there definitely is not mass combat.
No,
that's
a pretty hefty thing that probably would show up in, for example, an adventure path where you were leading armies or leading an armada,
or just a book that was super dedicated to subsystems, because the amount of work you have to do to get a mass combat system that works correctly is substantial.
Yep.
And it's enough that it would be like maybe as much as
it would be a big chunk of a book. It would take as much
effort as like half the entire subsystem chapter at least.
Let's see here. So more specifics on the Give More Feats variant. I'm going to defer to the Gamemastery guide for that.
Wait, I thought I answered the specifics on how
we talked about a little bit of it.
He was asking how it will impact balance. I think this is the same question that I answered.
Move on.
Move on to Author's Tale. Is there advice for how to integrate with regular play so it doesn't feel like it's changed to a completely different game?
So I think that this is one of the things that the victory point system and a lot of the subsystems really have a strength going for them, in that they're all built assuming that you're playing Pathfinder Second Edition. So they all they all assume that you're using the same 3-action economy, that you're using the same skills, that you're using the same abilities your character has. You're just using them in a little bit of a context that's different from an initiative-based combat turn.
You might be on such a long
you still might be right.
That we say, okay, each of these turns, and sometimes they're encountered, each of these turns takes like a half an hour. So, and you do pick one action to do during that time. We're not going to say 3 actions per half hour. That might as well have been 1 action per 10 minutes.
Sure.
When it takes
But to the point of the question, we're trying to work within that familiar framework. So it's kind of giving you context to use those abilities without saying, okay, forget everything you've learned, now learn this new thing.
Right. And you'll see things like rolling a check and getting a critical success.
Yep. Whether you're in an infiltration or if you're researching.
It can help you meet your goals in infiltration. It can help you get more research when you're researching. It can help you influence someone in the influence system. Your critical success, just like you learned it before, is going to do the things that you want it to do.
Yep.
A lot of the
critical failure might do something real bad.
A lot of the subsystems in Pathfinder First Edition, verbal duels are a good example, wound up having such different rules because of the fact that fundamentally the math of Pathfinder First Edition, like,
it was a different game.
You could run the game, but it was not balanced in a way that you could predict anything about its numbers. You could have someone who was like, I'm a specialist at researching. My 10th level character has plus 20. That's pretty good, right? 13 from ranks. I've got some intelligence. And another person who has plus 70. Who came to the same, oh yeah, you're a joke. I'm plus 70 in Pathfinder First Edition.
So we didn't want to do that
rules like verbal duels, which like sort of stripped down what bonuses you had, made it so you could actually run a verbal duel and have everyone participate rather than one person with plus 70 just doing it all.
That's right.
In Second Edition, we do not need to do that because
we're adhering to the math that we already have.
That we knew could work for the subsystems.
Right.
And therefore, it will feel, hopefully, just like being
the
part
same
of the
game.
Yeah.
What sort of alternate rules are going to be in this book? So we actually talked about that. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
So thoroughly, we gave them all.
A variant rule to change the death save. That's probably the recovery save to a fort
recovery
save.
check. No. While we may have like over a dozen different death rules that are floating around the Paizo office from various times, we did not insert any variants, any of those as variants.
We're confused enough as it is. We need to stick with one for a little while. Yeah, so, wow, we are really excited about dual classing.
Amos Thurio is at least, if dual classing doesn't impact the balance very much, just giving extra feature archetypes impacted even less. So, dual classing is the one that actually might affect it. As we said before, you might like literally have to also just those stronger monsters.
Right. Most of the other ones,
archetypes and some of the other variants to get extra stuff like Paragon Ancestries, where you have more ancestry feats. They say as the default for some of them, hey, you probably don't have to do the ancestry one. You probably don't have to do anything.
Right.
But if you start finding that your players have found something that they're doing with this
that you didn't expect,
then you might.
Here's some strategies to address that.
But some of those start at a baseline that you don't have to do anything probably, because while they're stronger, it's not probably going to be by enough to throw things off.
They might have more abilities, but they're not necessarily more powerful abilities.
And not everything is something that power boosts. There are ones in there for some people find the amount of stuff you gain in Pathfinder Second Edition to be too much, and it's just overwhelming. We have some to gain a little bit fewer of things when you
streamline it a little bit.
And then we talk about that. It's like you probably don't have to weaken the monsters if you do one of the variants where you curtail on skill feats. But keep in mind the party is not going to be as capable at skill-based challenges as you expect. So you might want to lower the DCs at the very least, or lower your expectations of what they can do.
Yeah. So we've got a question here that I'm going to go ahead and answer.
Sure.
There's a question from Statler97, whether any subsystems in the next AP, whether there will be any subsystems in the next AP we can mention.
Based on the circus.
Based on the circus theme. So the upcoming adventure path is the Extinction Curse, and it is a theme where you are managing a circus and running around the Isle of Kortos trying to figure out what's going wrong and why things are dying.
Yes, but other than that, we probably shouldn't reveal any information that hasn't already been given. I don't know what has in terms of what mechanics are in it. But you could expect that if you're running a circus, there's got to be rules for running a circus. I think that's fair. But beyond that, you're going to be able to figure it out.
Let's see here. So, rules for alternative spellcasting, not necessarily in this book.
No.
You'll see, let's see here. I know it's been announced that in the Advanced Player's Guide, we're bringing forward 2 new spellcasting classes.
That's true. But I think alternative spellcasting means something like totally different, where it's like everything's on magic points or something like that.
Oh, yeah. We'll think about it.
So those are not going to be in... So just to understand, the Gamemastery Guide has a lot of pages. It's divided among many topics. There are a little over 20 pages of variant rules. They pack in so much versatility. There's so much that you can play for decades off of the different things that you're doing on them, but it's not going to have every variant that Unchained, a book that was all variant rules, is going to have.
All right. Do we have any more questions out there that we should be looking at?
What else do people want to know about the book? If not, then let's see. We covered intelligent items.
What is your favorite thing about working on this book, Mark?
What was my favorite thing about working on this book? I don't know. I like the variant rules. I'm very much about modding your game. So, that was my favorite thing. Like, I did the initial writing of, like, all of them except for Deep Backgrounds, it's Ron Lundeen wrote. So... that is definitely something I was passionate about. I wanted to do that first. I wanted to make sure we included some... Pharaoh suggests finishing it. That was also pretty amazing.
Finishing it was pretty amazing.
Today is going to go. It's going to go over to those printers. To the printers. Those printers.
So it is officially a done book.
It's probably going to have happened maybe while we were doing this. Although maybe not. Because maybe it's after the ice cream party that they're doing. As long as
also right now.
Yes, while Liz and I and Peyton are here.
See how much we love you. We gave up ice cream for you.
Yeah, we gave up some really good ice cream because we wanted to see you guys so much.
But we've got to go ahead and get wrapped up here. I just want to say thanks so much for everybody for coming out. You guys have been really fantastically supportive of me joining the design team here, and I want to say thank you for that. That's been really, really fantastic to see so much support for what is kind of a big step for me, and I'm excited to see what we can do about it. We want to mention that we've got
Dragons and Things coming up. One of our sort of other fun streams that is on the Paizo stream.
Coming on in just an hour, so don't wander off too far.
Or wander, but then wander back. Whichever one you prefer.
Go have some ice cream.
Yeah, get some ice cream. If you have ice cream.
Everyone should have ice cream.
Everyone should have ice cream. So, other than that, have a great weekend, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed. And again, thanks so much for being here.
I'm Mark Seifter.
I'm Liz Liddell.
And this has been Paizo Friday. So join us next week where we're going to be talking about
some questions.
Some questions that you have all been asking for a while. And we might even be able to talk to you a little bit about errata, but don't get your hopes all the way up yet. We're going to see.
We're going to see what we can do.
We're going to try. We're going to do the best we can.
So, all right. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.